Arif sat alone in the dim room, the lamp's frail light stretching across the desk like a thin lifeline between him and the rest of the world. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even shift his gaze. It was as if his body had turned to stone while his mind floated just above him, watching. He hadn't planned for this moment, it simply happened. One minute he'd come home exhausted, frustrated, overwhelmed, and the next he found himself sitting in that chair, staring into nothingness. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the old wall clock, a sound he usually ignored but now heard clearly, as though each second was tapping on his consciousness. He felt the weight of his own stillness. At first it was uncomfortable. The mind isn't used to quiet, it fights it. His thoughts bounced around impatiently, demanding attention, worries about work, mistakes he made, messages he hadn't replied to, unresolved arguments that floated like shadows. But the longer he remained motionless, the more these thoughts began to slow. They didn't disappear, they simply lost their urgency. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, Arif was not reacting to anything. He was just existing. The room seemed to stretch, like time itself was expanding. The lamp flickered once, and he blinked. That blink felt loud. He noticed the patterns on the wall, faint cracks that formed a map he had never paid attention to before. He noticed how the air felt heavier near the floor and cooler near the window. He noticed the smell of old books from the shelf behind him, a scent that culled memories from years ago, long afternoons in school libraries, scribbling dreams into notebooks, feeling like the future was something bright and reachable. Inside the quiet, his emotions began to drift up like dust caught in sunlight. A small ache formed in his chest. He didn't know if it was sadness, longing, or simply the weight of everything he'd been ignoring. He remembered the laughter of people he no longer spoke to, promises he made to himself that he'd never kept, ambitions he had set aside because life demanded something else from him. Every memory arrived gently, as if afraid to overwhelm him, yet strong enough to pull at him. He wasn't crying, he wasn't smiling, he was simply feeling, and somehow that was more intense than any outburst. The silence was no longer an empty void, it was a mirror. In that mirror he saw a version of himself he had neglected, softer, hopeful, burdened, human. And as he sat there, unblinking, motionless, he realized that this pause, this stillness, was something he had been running from for far too long. As Arif continued to sit in the dim room, something inside him shifted, not as a dramatic revelation, but as a slow unfolding, like a flower opening in the dark. His breath deepened without him noticing, his shoulders softened, and a strange sense of clarity began to seep through the cracks of his exhaustion. The silence that once felt heavy now wrapped around him like a blanket, warm and grounding. It allowed him to see the parts of his life he had been rushing through, the emotions he had pushed aside in the name of being strong or responsible. It became clear that the stillness wasn't trapping him, it was freeing him from the noise that had been controlling him. Images drifted through his mind, not memories this time, but possibilities. What if he changed something? What if life didn't have to feel like a constant race where he always lost a step? These thoughts didn't come with urgency or pressure, they came lightly, almost shyly, like hopes testing whether they were allowed to exist again. He felt the faint flicker of motivation, a desire not to escape the silence but to bring its clarity with him when he left the room. He slowly leaned back, his muscles humming with the strange mix of relaxation and renewed awareness. The lamp's glow created soft shadows that moved as he breathed, and for the first time he noticed how calming that small detail was. Even the ticking clock, once a reminder of time slipping away, now sounded steady and reassuring, like footsteps leading him somewhere instead of chasing him. He realized that he had been living in constant resistance, rushing, worrying, reacting. But here, in stillness, he found acceptance. Not resignation, but understanding. A deep sigh escaped him, unplanned, almost startling. It felt like something inside him released, a tension he didn't know he had been carrying for years. In that sigh was forgiveness for mistakes he couldn't change, patience for struggles he hadn't overcome yet, and permission to simply be human. He recognized that life wasn't asking him to move faster, it was asking him to be honest with himself. The silence had stripped away the noise until all that remained was the truth he had been avoiding. He wasn't weak, lost, or broken. He was tired, he needed rest, reflection, and a chance to reconnect with himself. When he finally stood up, the movement felt intentional, almost ceremonial. The room looked the same, but he didn't. His breathing was steadier, his mind clearer, and his heart lighter. As he reached for the door, he didn't feel like he was leaving the peace behind, he felt like he was taking it with him.